The funeral director's voice was steady, professional, even as he delivered the news that would shatter everything Clara thought she knew about herself. "We found these items in your mother's personal effects," he said, sliding a manila envelope across the polished mahogany desk. The safety deposit box key was taped to the back of her jewelry box. "We thought you should have them before you start your new life." Clara Bennett stared at the envelope, her wedding dress rustling as she shifted in the uncomfortable chair. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. In 3 hours, she would walk down the aisle of the historic Savannah Theater, past 200 guests, to marry the man she loved. But Eleanor Bennett, the woman she'd called mother for 23 years, had died of a heart attack just 5 days earlier. And even death couldn't grant Clara the peace she'd thought it would. "I don't understand," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What safety deposit box?" "Mother never mentioned. It was registered under her maiden name," the funeral director explained gently. "Eleanor Richardson. Perhaps she opened it before her marriage and simply ... forgot to mention it." Clara's fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a brass key, a handwritten note in her mother's careful script, and a sealed letter, marked "For Clara open only if something happens to me." The note was brief. "The truth is in box 247. I'm sorry, my darling. I'm so very sorry." Clara's blood turned to ice. She looked up at the funeral director, but he was already retreating, sensing the private nature of whatever revelation was about to unfold. Alone in the quiet funeral home, Clara tore open the sealed letter with shaking hands. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper from the pages. "My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're about to discover that everything you thought you knew about yourself is a lie. Your name isn't Clara Bennett. You were born Lily Hayes, and you have a family who has been searching for you for 23 years. I pray you can forgive us for what we've done. We loved you so much that we convinced ourselves our lies were kindness." The safety deposit box contains everything: your birth certificate, photographs, legal documents, and a journal that belonged to your real mother. Her name was Amelia Hayes, and she died trying to protect you. I'm sorry, my darling. I'm so very sorry. The letter fell from Clara's numb fingers. In the suffocating silence of the funeral home, she could hear her heart pounding like a war drum, each beat echoing the question that would haunt her. Who am I? But that was 3 days ago. Now, as she stood in her childhood bedroom, smoothing the layers of silk and lace that would transform her into a bride, Clara hadn't yet found the courage to visit that safety deposit box. She'd hidden the key in her jewelry box, alongside her grandmother's pearls and her mother's wedding ring, telling herself she'd deal with it after the honeymoon, after she'd built a life with Liam, after she'd had time to process Eleanor's death and plan her future. The dream always began the same way: smoke curling through Spanish moss, a woman's voice calling through the darkness, and the overwhelming scent of gardenias mixed with something acrid and wrong. Clara jolted awake in her childhood bedroom, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. The silk nightgown clung to her skin, damp with perspiration that had nothing to do with Savannah's humid August morning. She pressed her palms against her temples, trying to banish the fragments that scattered like startled moths whenever she reached for them. The dream had been visiting her more frequently in recent weeks, intensifying as her wedding day approached. But since finding Eleanor's letter, the dreams had become more vivid, more urgent, as if some part of her subconscious was trying to claw its way to the surface. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, displaying an unknown number with a Georgia area code. Clara hesitated, then answered. "Your name isn't Clara." The voice was gravelly, worn by years and cigarettes. "And they're not your real family." The line went dead before she could respond. leaving her staring at the phone in disbelief. Her hands trembled as she set it aside, the stranger's words echoing in the sudden silence of her room. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Someone knew about Eleanor's letter, about the safety deposit box, about the secrets that had been buried for 23 years. Clara reached for her jewelry box with shaking fingers, lifting the velvet tray that held her everyday pieces. Underneath, wrapped in tissue paper, was the brass key and Eleanor's letter. She'd read it so many times the creases were beginning to tear, but she couldn't stop herself from unfolding it again. Your name isn't Clara Bennett. You were born Lily. Hayes. The words seemed to pulse on the page, as if they had a heartbeat of their own. Clara closed her eyes and tried to remember being 6 years old, tried to grasp at memories that felt like smoke. There were fragments, the smell of honeysuckle, the sound of a woman singing, the feel of a worn ragdoll clutched in small hands. But every time she reached for them, they dissolved like morning mist. Downstairs, the Bennett household hummed with controlled chaos. Eleanor's absence was a hole in the fabric of the day, but Richard Bennett, Clara's adoptive father, had thrown himself into wedding preparations with the desperate energy of a man trying to outrun his grief. Clara could hear him directing the florists, caterers, and wedding planners with uncharacteristic intensity, his voice carrying the brittle edge of someone barely holding himself together. "There's my beautiful bride," he called out as Clara descended the sweeping staircase. But his smile didn't reach his eyes, and she could see the weight of secrets in the lines around his mouth. "How did you sleep, darling?" "Fine, Daddy. Just fine." The lie came easily, as lies often did in the Bennett household. Clara had learned that lesson well over the years. Sometimes kindness looked like deception, and love could be built on foundations of sand. Richard's sharp eyes caught the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself, as if bracing for impact. "Wedding day nerves," he said, wrapping her in a hug that smelled of aftershave and desperation. "Perfectly normal. Every bride feels a little overwhelmed." But Clara could feel the subtle tremor in his hands, the way he held her just a beat too long, as if he were afraid she might disappear. Did he know about Eleanor's letter? Had he been waiting for this day, dreading the moment when their carefully constructed world would come crashing down? "Daddy," Clara said carefully, "was there anything Mother wanted to tell me before she died? Anything she said about ... about the past?" Richard's face went pale, and for a moment Clara thought he might confess everything. But then his expression shuddered, and he managed a weak smile. "She said she loved you more than life itself, that you were the greatest gift she ever received. That's all that matters, Clara. Love is all that matters." But as he walked away, Clara caught the way his shoulders sagged, the way he pressed a hand to his chest as if his heart were breaking. Whatever secrets Eleanor had taken to her grave, Richard carried them too, and they were killing him by inches. The historic Savannah Theater had been transformed into a southern gothic fairy tale. White roses and magnolia blossoms cascaded from every available surface, their perfume mixing with the scent of old wood and centuries of stories. Clara stood in the bridal suite, surrounded by her bridesmaids' college friends, who chattered about hair and makeup while she stared at her reflection in the antique mirror. The woman looking back at her was a stranger. Oh, the features were familiar. The dark hair that Eleanor always said came from Richard's side, the green eyes that seemed to hold secrets she couldn't name, the high cheekbones that photographed beautifully. But today, something was different. Today, she looked like she was wearing a mask. "Clara, honey, you need to eat something," her maid of honor, Sarah, said, holding out a plate of delicate finger sandwiches. "You're pale as a ghost." "I'm fine," Clara murmured, but her hands were shaking as she applied her lipstick. Every few minutes, she found herself reaching for her phone, checking for missed calls from that gravelly voice. Who was he? How did he know about her adoption? And why was he calling now on the most important day of her life? "Maybe we should call your father," Sarah suggested, her voice gentle with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "No," Clara said quickly. "I'm fine. Just missing Mother, you know." But it was more than that. Clara felt like she was standing on the edge of a precipice, one foot in the life she'd always known, and one foot in a truth that could destroy everything. The safety deposit box key seemed to burn in her jewelry box upstairs, a small brass reminder that some secrets were too heavy to carry alone. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting to see Richard or one of the wedding coordinators. Instead, a woman she didn't recognize entered the suite. She was middle-aged, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that seemed familiar in a way that made Clara's chest tighten. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight southern accent. "I'm Margaret Hayes. I work with the caterers, and I just wanted to see you on your wedding day." Clara's blood turned to ice. Hayes, the name from Eleanor's letter, the name that was supposed to be her own. "I don't understand," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You look just like her. Just like my sister did when she was your age." She reached into her purse and pulled out a faded photograph. "This is Amelia Hayes, your mother." Clara's bridesmaids gasped, but Clara barely heard them. She was staring at the photograph, at the woman who had her eyes, her smile, her stubborn chin. In the picture, the woman Amelia held a little girl, with dark hair and serious green eyes, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. "That's impossible," Clara whispered. "Eleanor is my mother." "Eleanor Bennett. Eleanor Bennett was the woman who raised you," Margaret said gently. "But Amelia Hayes was the woman who gave birth to you, the woman who loved you more than life itself, the woman who died trying to protect you." Clara's legs gave out, and she sank into a chair, the photograph trembling in her hands. "This can't be happening. Not today. Not now." "I'm sorry," Margaret said. "I know this is terrible timing, but I've been looking for you for 23 years. Ever since you were taken from us. Ever since the fire." "What fire?" Clara asked, though part of her already knew. The smoke in her dreams, the acrid smell that mixed with the gardenias, it was all connected. The fire that killed your mother. The fire that was meant to kill you too. Before Clara could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside. Voices rose in heated discussion, and she heard Richard's distinctive baritone cutting through the noise. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Richard Bennett's voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "This is a private event." "I need to speak with her," came the reply, the same gravelly voice from the phone call. "About her real family." Clara's heart pounded as she moved toward the door. Margaret followed, her face pale with understanding. "That's my husband," Margaret whispered. "Silas. He's been searching for you longer than anyone." Clara opened the door to find Richard facing off with the weathered man she'd heard on the phone. Silas looked like he'd been carved from Georgia clay, weathered and worn, but solid as bedrock. His clothes were clean but old, and his eyes held a sadness so profound it made Clara's chest ache. "You're her," he said simply, his voice breaking. "You're Lily." Richard stepped between them, his face flushed with anger and something else fear. "Clara, go back inside. This man is confused." But Clara couldn't move. She was holding the photograph Margaret had given her, and something deep inside her chest was cracking open, like ice breaking up in spring. "Let me see it," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Clara, no." Richard's voice was desperate now. "This is your wedding day. Don't let these ... people ruin it." But Clara pushed past him. drawn to Silas like a moth to flame. Up close, she could see the resemblance. He had her stubborn chin, her determined jawline. He was family in a way that felt cellular, primordial, true. "Your mama's name was Amelia Hayes," Silas said, his voice thick with emotion. "She died in a fire 23 years ago, and you were taken from us when you were 6 years old. They told us you were better off, that you'd forget. But we never forgot. We never stopped looking." Clara looked down at the photograph again, and suddenly the memories came flooding back. Not visual memories, but something deeper: the smell of honeysuckle and vanilla, the feel of gentle hands braiding her hair, a voice singing old lullabies in the dark. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember her voice." "That's impossible," Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Clara, you're our daughter. You've always been our daughter." "Then why did Eleanor have a safety deposit box full of documents?" "About Lily Hayes?" Clara asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Why did she leave me a letter saying my whole life was a lie?" Richard's face went ashen. "She told you?" "She died with the truth locked away," Clara said. "But she left me the key." Margaret stepped forward, her hand reaching for Clara's arm. "Honey, we know this is overwhelming. But you have a right to know where you came from. You have a right to know what happened to your mother." "What happened to her?" Clara asked, though she dreaded the answer. Silas's face darkened. "She was murdered. And the people who killed her took you away to keep you quiet." The hallway fell silent except for the distant sound of wedding preparations continuing below. Clara could hear Liam's voice somewhere in the building, could hear the musicians tuning their instruments, could hear the guests beginning to arrive. Her perfect day was crumbling around her, but underneath the devastation, she felt something else: relief. The truth was finally coming to light. "I need to know everything," she said finally. "I need to know who I really am." They moved to a small, private room away from the wedding chaos. Richard sat heavily in a chair, his head in his hands, while Margaret and Silas perched on the edge of an antique settee. Clara remained standing, still wearing her silk robe, the photograph clutched in her hands. "Your mama worked for the Ashworth family," Silas began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Charles Ashworth owned half of Atlanta back. Then old money, old name, old ways of thinking. They had a big estate outside the city, and your mama was their housekeeper." Clara's chest tightened. "Why would a housekeeper's daughter be adopted by the Bennetts?" "Because the Ashworths needed you to disappear," Margaret said quietly. "Because you were the only witness to what really happened that night." "What night?" Clara asked, though she was beginning to understand that some truths were too terrible to speak aloud. "The night Michael Ashworth tried to rape your mother," Silas said, his voice hard as flint. "The night she fought him off and threatened to go to the police. The night they decided she was too dangerous to let live." Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "He killed her?" "He set the fire," Silas confirmed. "But his daddy helped cover it up, made it look like an accident. And then they had their lawyer arrange for you to be adopted by a suitable family, one that would keep you quiet and far away from Atlanta." Clara looked at Richard, who was still sitting with his head in his hands. "Daddy, is this true?" Richard's voice was muffled by his palms. "We didn't know. I swear to you, Clara, we didn't know about the murder. The lawyer told us your mother had died in an accident, that you were traumatized and needed a stable home. We thought, we thought we were saving you." "But you knew she wasn't really dead," Clara said. "You knew there was family looking for me." "We knew there were relatives," Richard admitted. "But the lawyer said they were unsuitable, poor, uneducated, unable to provide for you properly. We thought we were giving you a better life." "You thought you were stealing a child," Margaret said, her voice sharp with years of pain. "You thought you could erase her history and make her yours." "We loved her," Richard said desperately. "We gave her everything we had. We raised her as our own daughter." "But she wasn't your daughter," Silas said. "She was ours. She was Lily Hayes, and she had a family who loved her first." Clara closed her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what she was learning. Her entire life had been built on a lie so massive it defied comprehension. Every birthday, every Christmas, every family tradition, all of it was stolen from the people who should have been celebrating with her. "I need to see the safety deposit box," she said finally. "I need to see what Eleanor left for me." "Clara, please," Richard said. "Today's your wedding day. Whatever's in that box can wait. Don't let this destroy the life you've built." "The life I've built?" Clara laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "The life I've built is a lie. How can I marry Liam when I don't even know who I am?" "You're our daughter," Richard said desperately. "You're Clara Bennett. You're intelligent, kind, beautiful, successful. You're about to marry a wonderful man who loves you. That's who you are." "I'm Lily Hayes," Clara said, testing the name on her tongue. It felt right in a way that Clara never had, like coming home to a place she'd never known she'd left. "I'm the daughter of Amelia Hayes. I'm the survivor of a murder that was covered up for 23 years. Margaret reached for her hand. "Honey, we know this is overwhelming, but you don't have to choose between your past and your future. You can be both Clara and Lily. You can honor your mother's memory and still build a life with the man you love." "Can?" Clara asked. "Can I really? How do I look at Richard and not see the man who helped steal me from my family? How do I look at Liam and not see someone who fell in love with a lie?" Before anyone could answer, there was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," Clara called. Liam entered, looking confused and concerned. He was already dressed in his tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, his face carrying the nervous excitement of a groom about to marry the woman he loved. But when he saw Clara's tear-stained face and the strangers in the room, his expression shifted to alarm. "Clara, what's wrong?" "People are starting to worry. The ceremony is supposed to start in an hour." Clara looked at the man she was supposed to marry, at his kind eyes and gentle smile, and felt her heart break. "Liam, I need to tell you something that changes everything." He moved to her side, his hand finding hers automatically. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. That's what marriage is, facing everything together." "I don't know if I can marry you today," Clara said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I don't know if I can marry anyone until I know who I am." Liam's face went pale. "I don't understand." Clara told him everything: the letter from Eleanor, the safety deposit box, the revelation about her adoption, the truth about her mother's death. With each word, she watched his world reshape itself, just as hers had. "Jesus," he whispered when she finished. "Clara, I'm so sorry. This must be... God, I can't even imagine." "I'm not Clara," she said quietly. "I'm Lily Hayes. I'm the daughter of a woman who was murdered, and I'm the survivor of a cover-up that's been going on for 23 years. Liam was quiet for a long moment, his hand still holding hers. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, so you're Lily Hayes. I fell in love with your heart, your soul, your laugh, your stubborn streak. I don't care what your name is. But I care," Clara said. "I care that my entire life has been built on a lie. I care that my mother was murdered, and no one was ever held accountable. I care that I have family who've been grieving for me for 23 years. Then what do you want to do?" Liam asked. Clara looked around the room at the faces of people who'd shaped her life. Richard, who'd loved her but stolen her. Margaret and Silas, who'd searched for her. Liam, who was willing to love whoever she turned out to be. "I want to go to the safety deposit box," she said. "I want to see what Eleanor left for me. I want to understand the whole truth before I make any decisions about my future." Liam nodded slowly. "Then let's go. I'll drive you." "What about the wedding?" Clara asked. "What about the guests?" "I'll handle it," Richard said, his voice hollow. "I'll tell them there's been a family emergency. I'll reschedule everything." "No," Clara said firmly. "Tell them the truth. Tell them that the bride has discovered she's not who she thought she was, and she needs time to figure out who she really is." Richard's face crumpled. "Clara, don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've built together." "I'm not throwing anything away," Clara said. "I'm trying to build something real, something honest, something that honors both the woman who raised me and the woman who gave birth to me." The drive to the bank took 20 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. Clara sat in the passenger seat of Liam's car, still wearing her wedding dress, while Margaret and Silas followed in their pickup truck. The safety deposit box key felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her hand. "Are you ready for this?" Liam asked as they pulled into the bank's parking lot. "No," Clara said honestly, "but I have to do it anyway." The bank manager, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, looked confused by the strange procession that entered his establishment. A bride in a wedding dress, a groom in a tuxedo, and 2 weathered strangers who looked like they'd stepped out of a different century. "Miss Bennett?" he said uncertainly. "Is everything all right?" "I'm here to access Eleanor Bennett's safety deposit box," Clara said, producing the key and Eleanor's letter. "She left instructions that I should have access to everything." Mr. Henderson examined the documents carefully, then nodded. "Of course, please follow me." The safety deposit box was larger than Clara had expected. Inside, she found a treasure trove of documents that told the story of her real life, her original birth certificate, listing her as Lily Amelia Hayes, daughter of Amelia Hayes and Tommy Hayes. Photographs of her as a baby, a toddler, a little girl with serious green eyes, and a ragdoll clutched in her arms. Legal documents showing the adoption proceedings, including a memo from the lawyer stating that the adoption needed to be handled discreetly, and that all records should be sealed indefinitely. But it was the journal that made Clara's hands shake. It was small and leather-bound, filled with her mother's handwriting, dated from the months before her death. Clara opened it to a random page and read, "Lily asked me today why I cry sometimes when I think she's not looking. How do I tell a 6-year-old that monsters exist? That they wear expensive suits and family crests? That they think they can take whatever they want because they've always been told the world belongs to them?" Michael Ashworth cornered me in the pantry again today. He put his hands on me, and when I pushed him away, he said I should be grateful for his attention. He said a woman like me should know her place. I have to get us away from here. I have to protect my lily pad from the darkness that's growing in this house. Clara's vision blurred with tears. She turned the page and read, "I found a new job in Savannah. A family who needs a housekeeper, and they've said Lily can come with me. We're going to start over, just the 2 of us. I'm going to tell Mr. Ashworth tomorrow that we're leaving. I'm scared, but I'm more scared of what will happen if we stay. Lily deserves better than this. She deserves to grow up in a world where she's safe, where she's valued, where she knows she's loved." The next entry was dated the day before Amelia's death. "He knows. Michael knows I'm planning to leave. He came to my room tonight and said he wouldn't let me go. He said I belonged to him now, that I was his property. I fought him off, but he's coming back. I know he's coming back. I've hidden this journal in Lily's room, behind the loose board by her bed. If something happens to me, I want her to know that I loved her more than life itself. I want her to know that she comes from strength, that she comes from people who fight for what's right, even when it's hard. I want her to know that her voice matters, that her story matters, that she has the power to make the world better just by being in it. Clara's hands shook as she turned to the final entry. I can smell smoke. The house is on fire. I can't to Lily's room. The hallway is blocked, but I can see her through the window. She's in the garden, safe. My lily pad is safe. I'm going to try to get to her, but if I can't, I hope someday she'll read this and know that her mama loved her. I hope she'll know that she's destined for great things. I hope she'll use her voice to speak for people who can't speak for themselves. I hope she'll remember that she's a Hayes, and Hayes women don't give up. We don't give up, and we don't stay silent. Clara closed the journal and looked up at Liam, who was reading over her shoulder. His face was pale, his eyes bright with unshed tears. She loved you so much, he whispered. She died trying to protect you. And they covered it up, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. They murdered her and made it look like an accident. They stole me from my family and sealed all the records so no one would ever know the truth. Margaret and Silas were waiting in the bank lobby, their faces tense with anticipation. When Clara emerged from the vault, carrying the journal and a box of photographs, they both stood as if they were greeting a ghost. She kept a journal, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. She wrote about Michael Ashworth, about what he did to her, about how she was planning to leave, about how she died trying to protect me. Silas's face was hard as granite. We always knew it wasn't an accident, but we could never prove it. This is proof, Clara said, holding up the journal. This is her testimony. This is her voice speaking. From beyond the grave. What are you going to do with it? Margaret asked. Clara looked around at the faces of the people who'd become her blood family and chosen family, past and present. I'm going to make sure her story is told. I'm going to make sure Michael Ashworth's crimes don't die with him. I'm going to make sure that what happened to her doesn't happen to anyone else. The Ashworth family is still powerful, Silas warned. They still have money, connections, influence. They'll try to silence you, just like they silenced her. Then they'll learn that Hayes women don't stay silent, Clara said, her voice steady with newfound resolve. They'll learn that some truths are too big to bury. The drive back to Savannah was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Clara sat in the passenger seat of Liam's car, still wearing her wedding dress. But she felt like a completely different person than the woman who'd put it on that morning. She was Lily Hayes, daughter of Amelia, Tummy, keeper of their memory, and inheritor of their strength. What happens now? Liam asked as they pulled into the city limits. Now I go back to the theater and tell Richard the truth, Clara said. All of it. No more secrets, no more lies. And then I decide what kind of life I want to build. Not as Clara Bennett, the woman who was stolen, but as Lily Hayes, the woman who survived. The historic Savannah Theater was in chaos when they arrived. Guests milled about uncertainly, whispers following Clara as she walked through the lobby. She could see Richard in the garden, surrounded by concerned relatives and friends, his face pale with the strain of making excuses. Clara found him by the fountain, where white roses floated on the water like fallen stars. He looked up as she approached, hope and fear warring in his eyes. Clara, he said, rising from the stone bench, thank God you're back. I've been telling everyone you felt ill, that we needed to postpone. We can still salvage this. We can still. I know everything. Clara said quietly. I read her journal. I know what happened to my mother. I know how she died. I know why you and Eleanor really adopted me. Richard's face crumpled. Clara, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain, Clara said. You were told a child needed a home and you provided one. You were told she was an orphan, and you believed it. You were told the adoption was legal, and you trusted the lawyer. You're not the villain in this story, Richard. You're just another victim of the Ashworth family's crimes. But I should have questioned it, Richard said desperately. I should have investigated further. I should have made sure you weren't being stolen from people who loved you. You should have, Clara agreed, but you didn't. And I can't change that any more than you can. The question is, what do we do now? Richard looked around at the wreckage of the wedding preparations, at the guests, who were beginning to leave, at the life that was crumbling around them. I don't know. I don't know how to fix this. We don't fix it, Clara said. We face it. We tell the truth, and we deal with the consequences. We honor my mother's memory by refusing to let her story die with her. What about us? Richard asked. What about our family? Clara looked at the man who'd raised her, who'd loved her, who'd given her everything he had to give. We figure out how to be a family based on truth instead of lies. We figure out how to love each other despite the mistakes we've made. We figure out how to honor both the woman who raised me and the woman who gave birth to me. And Liam? Richard asked. What about your future? Clara looked back at Liam, who was standing by the theater entrance, still wearing his tuxedo, still waiting for her decision. I don't know. I don't know if I can build a future until I've made peace with my past. She walked back to where Liam was waiting, her wedding dress rustling against the cobblestones. The sun was setting over Savannah, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and Clara felt like she was seeing the city for the first time. I can't marry you today, she said when she reached him. I can't marry anyone until I know who I really am. Liam's face was sad but understanding. I know. I've been thinking about it while you were talking to Richard. You need time to process this, to figure out who you are without the lies. I might not be the same person when I figure it out, Clara warned. I might be someone you don't recognize. Then, I'll fall in love with her too, Liam said simply. I'll fall in love with whoever you turn out to be. Clara reached up and kissed his cheek. I love you for saying that, but I need you to know that I might not come back. I might decide that Lily Hayes needs a different kind of life than Clara Bennett ever imagined. Then that's what I'll accept. Liam said, but I'll be here when you're ready, whatever you decide. Clara took off her engagement ring and placed it in his palm. Hold on to this for me. If I come back, if I figure out who I am and decide I want to build a life with you, then you can give it back to me. But if I don single quotes T ... I'll keep it safe, Liam promised. I'll keep it as a reminder of the woman I loved, no matter what her name was. Clara nodded, then walked back to where Margaret and Silas were waiting by their pickup truck. I want to see our grave, she said. I want to visit my mother. Are you sure? Margaret asked. It's been a long day. Maybe you should rest. Process everything that's happened. I've been processing for 23 years, without knowing what I was processing, Clara said. I need to see her. I need to tell her I remember. The drive to the cemetery took an hour, winding through Georgia countryside that grew more rural with each mile. Clara had changed out of her wedding dress and into simple clothes, but she still felt like she was wearing a costume, the costume of someone who'd spent her entire life playing the wrong role. Tell me about my father, she said as they drove through the gathering dusk. Margaret smiled from the passenger seat. Tommy was a good man. He had these big dreams about building houses, starting his own construction company. He was funny, kind, hardworking. He loved your mama fiercely, and he loved you even more. You were his whole world, Lily. When you were born, he used to say you were proof that miracles existed. He'd carry you around on his shoulders, pointing out every bird and flower like he was introducing you to the universe. Silas's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening. Tommy didn't take it well when Amelia died. He was broken, Lily. He searched for you day and night for months. Went to every police station, every lawyer, every newspaper that would listen. But the Ashworths had too much power. They made sure the story never got out. And Tommy, he just couldn't keep going without you and Amelia. He passed a year after. The fire. Heart gave out, but I think it was grief that killed him. Clara Lily felt a fresh wave of loss, like a tide pulling her under. She'd never known her father, but the weight of his absence settled into her bones. He never stopped looking for me, she whispered. Neither of us did, Margaret said, reaching back to squeeze her hand. Silas and I, we're your aunt and uncle. We didn't have much, but we had love for you. We tried to fight the system, but the Ashworths had lawyers, money, judges in their pockets. They told us you were better off, that you'd been adopted by a wealthy family who could give you everything we couldn't. We didn't believe it, but we had no proof. Until now. The cemetery was small, tucked away in a grove of live oaks draped with Spanish moss. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and decay, but there was a strange peace to the place, as if time had slowed to honor the dead. Silas led them to a simple headstone, weathered but cared for, with fresh wildflowers placed at its base. The inscription read, Amelia Hayes, beloved mother and sister, 1968 to 2002. Lily knelt beside the grave, her fingers tracing the carved letters. The dreams she'd had for weeks, the smoke, the gardenias, the voice calling her name felt like they'd been leading her here all along. I'm sorry it took me so long to find you, she whispered. I'm sorry I didn't know. Margaret knelt beside her, her arm warm around Lily's shoulders. She knows, honey. She's always known you'd come back to her. Silas stood a few feet away, his hat in his hands, his eyes fixed on the horizon as if he could see Amelia there, waiting. She'd be so proud of you, Lily. You've got her fire, her strength. You're a Hayes through and through. Lily placed the journal on the grave, its pages worn from her mother's hands and now her own. I'm going to make sure they pay for what they did to you, she said. I'm going to make sure the world knows your story. She stayed there until the stars came out, talking to her mother in whispers, piecing together the fragments of a life she'd never known. Margaret and Silas gave her space, sitting on a nearby bench, their presence a quiet anchor. When Lily finally stood, her legs stiff from kneeling, she felt lighter, as if some of the weight of the past had been left behind with the wildflowers. The next morning, Lily returned to Savannah alone. She needed to face Richard again, to confront the man who'd raised her with the truth she now carried. The Bennett house was quiet when she arrived, the wedding decorations gone, the chaos of the previous day replaced by an eerie stillness. Richard was in his study, surrounded by papers and photographs, his face haggard from a sleepless night. I wasn't sure you'd come back, he said as she entered. I wasn't sure I would, either, Lily admitted. She sat across from him, the journal in her lap. But I needed to see you, to understand why you and Eleanor kept this from me. Richard's hands shook as he poured himself a glass of bourbon, though it was barely past breakfast. We were scared, Clara Lily. We were scared of losing you. When the lawyer brought you to us, you were so small, so quiet. You'd been through so much. Eleanor fell in love with you the moment she saw you. She said you were our second chance after. His voice broke. After we lost our own baby. Lily's breath caught. You had a baby? A stillbirth, Richard said, his eyes distant. A little girl, born a year before you came to us. Eleanor never recovered from it. When the lawyer said there was a child who needed a home, who needed love, we thought it was fate. We didn't ask enough questions. We should have, but we didn't. Lily's heart ached for the pain in his voice, but it didn't erase the betrayal. You knew I had a family. You knew someone was looking for me. We were told they were unfit, Richard said. We were told your mother died in an accident, that your father was gone, that your relatives were too poor to care for you. We believed it because we wanted to believe it. We wanted you to be ours. But I wasn't, Lily said. And you let me grow up thinking I was someone I'm not. Richard looked at her, his eyes pleading. Can you ever forgive us? Lily thought of Eleanor's letter, of the apology written in her careful script. She thought of the love that had poured from those pages, even through the lies. I don't know, she said honestly. I want to. I know you loved me. But love doesn't erase the truth. It doesn't erase what was taken from me. Richard nodded, tears streaming down his face. What will you do now? I'm going to Atlanta, Lily said. I'm going to find out what's left of the Ashworth family. I'm going to make sure they answer for what they did to my mother. That's dangerous, Richard warned. They're not the kind of people who let their secrets come to light. I know, Lily said. But I'm not the kind of person who stays silent. She left the Bennett house with a suitcase of clothes, the journal, and the photographs. From the safety deposit box, Margaret and Silas had offered her a place to stay in their small home outside Atlanta, and she'd accepted, needing the connection to her real family, however fragile it might be. Liam called as she was packing, his voice steady despite the strain. I'm heading to Atlanta too, he said. Not to pressure you, but to be nearby if you need me. I meant what I said, Lily. I love you, whoever you are. She smiled, though he couldn't see it. Thank you, Liam. I don't know what I need yet, but knowing you're there, it helps. Atlanta was a different world from Savannah, bustling, modern, its skyline a testament to progress built on old money and older secrets. Margaret and Silas's home was modest, a single-story house with a sagging porch and a garden overflowing with vegetables. It felt like a place where truth could grow, unlike the polished perfection of the Bennett estate. Over the next few weeks, Lily immersed herself in her mother's journal, piecing together the details of Amelia's life and death. She learned about the Ashworth estate, a sprawling mansion that had been sold after the fire but still stood, now converted into a private event venue. Michael Ashworth, the man who'd attacked her mother, was still alive, a reclusive figure, living off his family's wealth in a gated community. His father, Charles, had died years ago, but the Ashworth name still carried weight in Atlanta's elite circles. Lily contacted a journalist named Rachel Carter, whose byline had appeared in articles about the Ashworth family's business dealings. Rachel was young, ambitious, and hungry for a story that could make her career. They met at a coffee shop in Midtown, where Lily laid out everything: the journal, the photographs, the adoption documents, the letter from Eleanor. This is explosive, Rachel said, her eyes wide as she flipped through the journal. If we can corroborate this, it's not just a story about a murder. It's a story about power, corruption, and a cover-up that spans decades. Can you help me? Lily asked. I need to know how to bring this to light without getting crushed by their lawyers. Rachel grinned. Oh, I've got contacts. Lawyers, investigators, even a few cops who aren't afraid of the Ashworth name. But you need to be prepared, Lily. They'll come after you. They'll try to discredit you, scare you, maybe worse. I'm not scared, Lily said, and for the first time, she meant it. She felt her mother's strength in her veins, her mother's voice in her heart. Rachel published the first article a month later, a carefully worded piece that laid out the allegations without naming Lily directly. It included excerpts from Amelia's journal, anonymized but powerful, and hinted at a larger investigation to come. The response was immediate. Social media buzzed with speculation, and ex-posts from Atlanta locals began digging into the Ashworth Family's history. Some called it a conspiracy theory. Others shared stories of their own encounters with the family's influence. Michael Ashworth's legal team issued a statement denying everything, calling the article baseless slander and threatening lawsuits. But the cracks in their armor were starting to show. A retired detective came forward, claiming he'd been pressured to close the case on Amelia's death without a proper investigation. A former Ashworth employee, now in her 60s, contacted Rachel with stories of intimidation and hush money, paid to keep workers quiet. Lily stayed with Margaret and Silas, finding comfort in their stories of her parents, in the way they welcomed her into their lives as if no time had passed. She spent evenings in their garden, planting flowers her mother had loved, feeling closer to Amelia with every seed she pressed into the earth. One night, as she sat on the porch with a cup of tea, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like your mother." The threat was meant to scare her, but it only fueled her resolve. She forwarded it to Rachel, who added it to the growing file of evidence. The breakthrough came when Rachel uncovered financial records showing payments from the Ashworth estate to the lawyer who'd arranged Lily's adoption. The lawyer was long dead, but the paper trail led to a shell company that still existed, managed by one of Michael Ashworth's cousins. It was enough to convince a district attorney to reopen the case, citing new evidence in Amelia Hayes's death. The investigation moved slowly, bogged down by legal maneuvering and the Ashworths' influence. But Lily didn't wait for the courts. She started speaking publicly, first at a small community center in Atlanta, then at larger venues as Rachel's articles gained traction. She told her mother's story, her own story, weaving them together into a call for justice that resonated far beyond Georgia. People began sharing their own stories of loss and cover-ups, of powerful families who thought they were untouchable. The hashtag Justice for Amelia trended on X, and Lily became a reluctant symbol of resilience. Liam visited every few weeks, bringing coffee and quiet support. He never pushed, never asked for more than she could give. One evening, as they sat on Margaret's porch, he handed her a small box. Inside was her engagement ring, polished and gleaming. "I'm not asking you to wear it," he said. "I just want you to know it's still here whenever you're ready. If you're ever ready." Lily took the ring, turning it over in her fingers. "I'm still figuring out who I am," she said, "but I'm starting to think Lily Hayes might want a life with you in it." "Just not yet. I can wait," Liam said, his smile soft. "I'm good at waiting." A year later, Michael Ashworth was arrested. The evidence was overwhelming. Amelia's journal, the financial records, the testimony of former employees, and a new forensic analysis that confirmed arson in the fire that killed her mother. The trial was a media circus, with cameras camped outside the courthouse and ex-posts dissecting every detail. Lily testified, her voice steady as she read from her mother's journal, her eyes locked on Michael Ashworth's face. He wouldn't meet her gaze. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning a guilty verdict. Michael was sentenced to life in prison for murder and conspiracy. His cousin faced charges for the cover-up, and the Ashworth family's empire began to crumble as more victims came forward with their own stories of abuse and intimidation. Lily stood outside the courthouse after the verdict, Margaret and Silas on either side of her, Rachel nearby with her notebook. The air was crisp, the first hint of autumn in Atlanta, and Lily felt like she could finally breathe. "It's not over," Rachel said, her voice gentle. "There's still the civil suit, the appeals, the other investigations." "I know," Lily said, "but it's a start. My mother's story is out there now. She's not forgotten anymore." That night, Lily returned to the cemetery. She brought fresh gardenias, their scent mingling with the earth as she laid them on Amelia's grave. "We did it, Mama," she whispered. "We told the truth. We made them listen." She felt a warmth in her chest, like a hand resting over her heart, and she knew her mother was with her. Not in the dreams anymore, but in the strength she carried, in the voice she'd found, in the life she was beginning to build. Lily moved to Atlanta permanently, renting a small apartment near Margaret and Silas. She started working with a nonprofit that advocated for victims of powerful abusers, using her story to inspire others to speak out. She visited Richard occasionally, their relationship fragile, but healing, built on a new foundation of honesty. He'd sold the Bennett estate, unable to live with its ghosts, and was living quietly in a condo by the coast. Liam proposed again 6 months after the trial, this time on a quiet evening, in Margaret's garden. Lily said yes, but they agreed to wait, to let her live as Lily Hayes for a while, before becoming anyone's wife. When they finally married, it was a small ceremony in that same garden, with Margaret and Silas walking her down the aisle, and Richard sitting in the front row, his smile bittersweet but genuine. Lily kept her mother's journal on her knitstand, reading it when she needed courage or comfort. She planted gardenias in her own small yard, their scent a reminder of the woman who'd fought for her, who'd loved her enough to leave a legacy of truth. And every year, on the anniversary of Amelia's death, Lily returned to the cemetery to tell her mother about the life she was building, a life of purpose, of love, of strength that came from knowing exactly who she was. Lily Hayes, daughter of Amelia and Tommy, survivor of a stolen past, and keeper of a story that would never be silenced again.